There we go, finally. Oh, this is a nice trout. Hoo, 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 hoo. I'm gonna loosen up that drag. There we go. There we go. Hey there, Saltstrong Nation. This is Pat Ogletree, and in case you're not familiar with who I am one of the fishing coaches here at Saltstrong. And in this video, I want to talk to you about 5 things that I learned from fishing nothing but topwater for an entire year. Now, to give you some history on why I fished nothing but topwater for an entire year, it's simply because I wanted to get good at topwater. Now, if anybody out there has ever fished topwater, they know how exciting that is with those blow-ups, and frankly, that is my favorite way of catching fish. But I really didn't know when, where, and how to fish topwater, so I figured the best way to learn is to go out and do it. Now, to keep me from having any type of temptation of going back to my confidence bait for an entire year when I went out on the kayak or when I went on land, all I did was bring topwaters with me, and I did learn some things that's going to help you save both time and money. The first thing that I'm going to tell you is the fact that you can catch fish year-round on topwater lures. I caught fish in every month from January to December, but there are certain times that you can use them and certain times that you shouldn't use them. Just because you can catch fish on topwater doesn't mean it's going to be a quantity thing. It's more of a fun way of fishing. Now, in the wintertime, as these fronts come through, the first thing it does is it drops that pressure down, or it drops that water temperature down, and the fish go into hiding into deep water. This is the time to not throw topwater. When you want to throw topwater is if you get a long warming trend in between these fronts, the fish are going to move up into that soft, muddy, shallow, wind-protected bottom, and then they will start feeding then. Now, with those things being said, if you think about it, we're talking about shallow water, we're talking about wind protection, and then we're talking about in the wintertime, most of the time the water is at its clearest. This is the time that you cannot throw big, loud, noisy lures. You have to have soft presentations. So in this situation, one of my favorite lures to throw is the MirrOlure 7M. Now, this is a floater diver lure. It doesn't have a rattle in it. It's a pretty basic, slim, small profile, as you can see right here. And I like this in the wintertime and in shallow conditions because it doesn't make a whole lot of noise. It actually is really, really effective. You don't want to throw any of those really big, loud, splashing lures. You want to go with something like this. Now, as springtime rolls out and the water starts to warm up a little bit, and then you get that bait hatch, that fry that's getting flushed out of the back creeks, what happens a lot of times is your predatory fish will school up and congregate in the areas that this bait is getting flushed out. And sometimes what happens is you'll get a concentration of so much bait fish, it's hard to distinguish your lure from that bait fish. And that's why I love using this lure right here. This is a propeller bait. It's got a little prop on the back of it. This one's made by High Roller. It's a wooden lure. They're out of Gainesville. And this is an excellent bait in that situation. If you need your lure to stand out, I love using a prop bait, and you can really work it hard to get that fish's attention. Now, I will say this lure right here, these prop baits, they don't have a long expectancy. They don't have a long time that you can use them. You can only use them for maybe about a month, and then after that, whenever that bait starts to disperse and the fish start to spread out a little bit more, these actually don't work as well as some of the other lures that we'll talk about. In early and mid-spring, I like starting out with smaller lures like this, smaller walking style lures like this. This is the Rapala Skitterwalk. This is the smaller of the 2 versions that they make. Now, this one with its smaller profile and its quieter rattle, it actually works better in the springtime because these fish aren't 100% fired up yet. We're waiting for the water to warm up, and then they'll start actively feeding. But when the fish are still feeding a little bit on the slower side, smaller presentations that are quieter work better. And this Rapala right here works really good in early spring. Now, when it comes to late spring, summer, and fall, that's when you want to use larger topwater lures like this Moonwalker right here. One of the reasons why you want to use a larger topwater lure in those times of the year is, 1, the fish are feeding more aggressively, 2, the bait fish is larger, and 3, you can cast them further and you can cover more ground. When it comes to late spring, summer, and fall time fishing, these bigger lures like the Moonwalker and then the Rapala Skitterwalk and the larger size like the one I showed you earlier are a great choice use for fishing these times of year. So when it comes to fall time fishing, that's when the bait fish is at its largest, and you really want to have something that you can draw the fish's attention to. And one of my favorite fall topwater lures is the Rapala Skitter V. Now, I work this one a little bit differently than I do a regular topwater, like your walking style, because this has a V-shaped bottom on it. Its original intention was to have a long glide when you would jerk it. You know, it would glide a lot further. Now, how I work these is I jerk the bait really hard each time that I jerk it. And what it does is, because of that flat V side, it actually throws more water and it attracts the fish's attention. So when there's a lot of bait around or the conditions are really, really choppy, that's when a lure like this Rapala Skitter V is going to shine. This is my favorite fall time fishing topwater. So that brings me to my third tip, and that is to work the lure in the same conditions that you are fishing, meaning if it's clear and calm out there, you really don't want to be very aggressive. Smaller, slower twitches and calmer conditions. Now, when it gets windier or choppier up there, that's when you want to use larger baits that make more noise, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get that fish's attention. So wintertime, when it's calm, use those small floater diver lures. Springtime, you know, whenever the wind is up a little bit, then you can start using those larger, louder lures. And then the fall time, when the bait's at its largest and you're getting those fronts that are starting to come through and the wind is up, that's when you want to be really aggressive and use lures like that Skitter V and the Moonwalker and just work them really, really hard and fast. You want to make as much commotion in the water as possible so they can find your lure in all of the waves and commotion that is out there. So the fourth tip I want to talk to you about is switching your lures to inline hooks. Now, the reason why you want to switch these over to your inline hooks is a couple of different reasons. First one is it's safer for you and it's safer for the fish. With all those hook points on treble hooks, and you've got 2 and sometimes 3 on some of these lures, that's a lot of ways you can get stuck. And then you can get those fish points in fish's eyes and their gills, and it's just not good in either situation. Another reason is if you look at the size of that hook and you look at the gap of the hook and the gauge of the wire, you can see that it's much bigger than these treble hooks that are in the traditional lures that come with them. As you can tell, the gauge is much smaller and the gap is much smaller. Now, what happens in that situation is with those treble hooks, you actually have a tendency to not get the hook in the fish as well because it doesn't have as big of a gap, and you can actually straighten those hooks out because it's got a smaller gauge. That is not a problem with the inline hooks. It's got a bigger gap so you can get a hold of that fish better, and it's got a larger metal gauge to it so you can put some more pressure on that fish to get it away from the docks and the mangroves and any type of structure that you need to. The inline hooks are absolutely the way to go. So the last tip I want to give you is make sure and use mono leader, and make sure it's at least 30 pounds or higher. Now, the reason why when you use mono leader instead of using fluoro leader is because fluoro actually sinks quicker, and when you're working a topwater lure, it will have a tendency to foul up in that front hook. So not only will the mono actually sink slower, when you increase that diameter to 30 pounds or more, what'll happen is that'll make it sink even slower than that, and that way that front hook won't get wrapped. Whenever you're using mono leader, it will greatly reduce the chances of that front hook getting fouled. Now, I know I didn't talk about every single lure that's out there, and I'm sure that you've probably got a favorite that you like to use that I didn't talk about, but the idea of this video is to help you save both time and money. These lures that I talked about in those situations that I talked about are proven winners. So if you go back, use the tips that I told you about and the lures that I told you about, I guarantee you will be productive with them. So if you'd like to try some of these lures that we talked about, like the Moonwalker or the Rapala Skitter Walker or the Rapala Skitter V, or even the Super Spook Junior, we have those along with the leader material that you need at fishstrong.com, and our insiders get an extra 20% off. So I hope you learned something from this video that'll help you put more fish in the boat next time. And if you get any questions, comments, or concerns, put them down below, and I'd like to hear what some of your favorite topwater lures that you use are. That'd be great to hear. And if you're new to Salt Strong, just know that we are the #1 online fishing club in America, where we guarantee that you will catch more fish in less time, save money on all the tackle that you need, and make friends fast, or it's free. For more information, go to saltstrong.com. Until then, we hope to see you in the Insider Club soon. Thanks for watching.